Shalom Aleichem, Mishpachim. I'm coming to you with a new addition to this channel, and I am going to be reading, trying to follow along with the Mishnah. Although I am not in accord with the community Mishnah study, I am starting on my own time frame. So I'm starting with the actual beginning with Brachos, the first tractate of the Mishnah. This is the Art Scroll edition, Schottenstein edition Mishnah. And so far I like this Mishnah. It's wonderful. It's very easy to understand. That's why, of course, they have it here. It's saying that it's elucidated, and it pretty much is for the most part, very much so, kind of easier to understand. Although there may be some complicated topics, but for the most part, the commentary on here is extensive, and it's the commentary helps greatly. So, all right, Mishnah 1. We are in tractate. We're in the book of Zeraim, and tractate Brachos. All right. Actually, I'd like to tractate Brachos help you guys understand. We'll do the introduction to the Seder Zeraim. The agricultural mitzvos. The first 6 orders of the Mishnah is Seder Zeraim, literally the order of plants. This order deals mainly with the mitzvos that apply to agriculture, farming, and produce of the land, mitzvos that are dependent on the land. These mitzvos include kilaim, the prohibition against planting different species of plants together, orla and revai, the prohibition of benefiting from the fruit of a tree for 3 years after it was planted, which is orla, and the special treatment of fruit that grows in its 4th year, revai. Bikurim, the first fruits to blossom, which must be brought to the temple. Matznos aniim, portions of the crop that must be left for the poor. Trumos and masros, the tithes that must be separated from produce. Among these are gifts to the Kohen, the Levi, and the poor. Shemitah and Yovel. The Torah establishes a 7-year agricultural cycle that affects a number of the laws pertaining to the land. The 7th year of the 7-year agricultural cycle is Shemitah. The 50th year, which follows 7 cycles of 7 years, is Yovel. The Shemitah and Yovel years are subject to many laws and restrictions. Chadash, the new grain, which may not be eaten until the Omer offering is brought on the 16th of Nisan. Challah, a portion of dough that must be given to a Kohen. On the biblical level, most of these mitzvos apply only in Eretz Yisrael, the land of Israel. This is due to the unique holiness of Eretz Yisrael, which Hashem promised our forefathers to give to their children, the nation of Israel, as their homeland. Almost all of these mitzvos apply nowadays, with regard to most of them. However, there is disagreement whether the obligation today is biblical or rabbinic in origin. All of these mitzvos have many details, and a brief outline of some of these details is presented here. A more extensive treatment of these mitzvos can be found in the general introduction to the tractate dealing with each particular mitzvah. Kilaim. With regard to the agricultural mitzvos, the term mixing of different types refers to mixing 2 types of plants. The Torah prohibits 2 types of agricultural kilaim. Kilaim of seeds. The Torah in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 19, forbids planting seeds of 2 different types of edible plants next to each other. The plants included in this prohibition are grains, legumes, and vegetables. The prohibition of kilaim of seeds applies to trees as well, but in a different way. While it is permissible to plant 2 types of trees, or a tree and a plant, next to each other, it is forbidden to graft 2 types of trees or a tree with a plant. This means that we may not insert a branch from one type of tree or a shoot from a plant into a branch or trunk of a different type of tree, causing the two to join together. If this prohibition was violated, the produce may nevertheless be eaten. Kilaim of the vineyard. The Torah in Deuteronomy chapter 22, verse 9, forbids planting a grain or vegetable near a grapevine, or a grapevine near a grain or vegetable. If this prohibition is violated, it is forbidden to derive any benefit from any of the produce. It must all be burned. The laws of Kilaim are the subject of Tractate Kilaim. Orla and Revai. The prohibition of Orla forbids eating or deriving other types of benefit from the fruit of a tree for 3 years after it was planted. You can find that in Leviticus chapter 19, verse 23. Fruit of the 4th year is known as Neta Revai, literally sapling of the 4th year. That produce has sanctity and has the same laws as Maser Sheni, as detailed below. Fruits that grow from the 5th year and on do not have any restrictions. The laws of Orla are the subject of Tractate Orla. Revai is discussed in the 5th chapter of Maser Sheni. Bikurim. There are 7 species of produce for which Eretz Yisrael is specifically praised. You could find that in Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 8. Wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. Every year, when the first growths of these grains or fruits appear, the owner marks them and designates them as first fruits. After the bikurim are fully grown and harvested, the owner brings them to the temple courtyard. The owner waves the bikurim along with the Kohen and recites the bikurim declaration. The bikurim are then placed near the altar. After the procedure is completed, the bikurim are distributed to the Kohanim in the temple. Bikurim may be eaten only in Jerusalem. They have the same sanctity as teruma. Thus, they may be eaten only by Kohanim who are tahor, who are clean. The laws of bikurim are the subject to Tractate Bikurim. Matnos Anaim. The Torah in Leviticus chapter 19, verses 9 and 10, and chapter 23, verse 22, and Deuteronomy chapter 24, verse 19 through 21 requires a person who harvests his crops to leave certain portions of the crop for the poor. These portions are known as gifts to the poor. There are 5 such gifts, aside from Maser Ani, the tithe of the poor, which will be discussed below. Peah, literally end. A person who harvests his field of grains or legumes must leave a section of it unharvested, to be taken by the poor. Similarly, a person who gathers the fruit of his orchard must leave some of the fruit unpicked, so the poor can take it. Leket, literally gatherings. When a person harvests his field, 1 or 2 stalks may fall to the ground. They must be left for the poor. This mitzvah applies to all produce that is obligated in peah, except fruit of trees. Shicha, forgotten. After a person harvests a field, he bundles the produce and then brings the bundles to the threshing area. If a person forgot 1 or 2 bundles in the field, he is not allowed to go back and get them, and must leave them for the poor. Furthermore, if a person is harvesting his field and he passes by some stalks without harvesting them, he may not go back and harvest them. Rather, he must leave them for the poor. These laws apply to any produce that is obligated in peah, including fruit of trees. The following 2 mitzvahs apply only to grapes. Peret. This parallels the mitzvah of leket. If a few grapes fall to the ground as they are being picked, they must be left for the poor. Olelos. This refers to grapes that never developed properly, as described in Peah, chapter 7, Mishnah 7, chapter 7, Mishnah 4. They too must be left for the poor. Matnos aniim have no sanctity. Therefore, once a poor person has taken them, he may give them to anyone to eat. Matnos aniim are the subject to Tractate Peah. Turumos and masros. After the crops have developed and have been processed to the point where they are ready to be used, the Torah requires that they be tithed before they are eaten. A number of tithes must be separated from the crop. 1 being teruma gedola, the greater teruma, which is given to a Kohen. 2. Being Maser Rishon, the first tithe, which is given to a Levi. 3. Being Terumas Maser, which the Levi separates from the Maser Rishon and gives to a Kohen. 4. Being Maser Sheni, the second tithe, which is eaten by the owner or others in Jerusalem. And 5. Being Maser Ani, the tithe of the poor, which is given to the poor. We will now discuss each of these. Teruma Gedola, you can find this in Numbers chapter 18 verse 12 and Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 4. This portion, which is usually simply referred to as teruma, must be given to a Kohen. By biblical law, there is no minimum amount for teruma. Teruma has a high level of holiness. It may be eaten only by a Kohen, his family, and his Canaanite slaves, and only when they are tahor, clean. And the teruma is tahor. The teruma needs to be tahor. If a non-Kohen intentionally eats teruma, he is liable to death by the hand of heaven, keres. If he eats it by mistake, he pays the value of the teruma plus an additional 25% to the Kohen who owned it. Maser Sheni, Numbers, you can find this in Numbers chapter 18 verse 21 and Deuteronomy chapter 14 verse 29. The owner of the produce separates 1/10 of what remains after teruma was separated and gives it to a Levi. This portion, which is usually simply referred to as maser, does not have sanctity. It may therefore be eaten by anyone, even while he or it is tameh, ritually impure. Terumas maser, you can find this in Numbers chapter 18, verse 26 through 32. Before the Levi is permitted to eat maser, he must separate 1/10 of it, which he gives to a Kohen. It has all the laws of teruma. Maser Sheni, you can find this in Deuteronomy chapter 14, verse 22 through 27. And 5. Maser Ani. After separating teruma and maser, the owner of the produce must separate an additional 1/10 from what remains as either Maser Sheni or Maser Ani. Which one of these tithes is given depends on the year as follows. A. During the 1st, 2nd, 4th, and 5th years of the Shemitah cycle, Maser Sheni is separated. Maser Sheni must be brought to Jerusalem and eaten there. It may not be eaten by someone who is tameh or by an onain, a person whose close relative died on that day. If Maser Sheni becomes tameh, it may not be eaten and must be burned. Instead of bringing the produce of Maser Sheni itself to Jerusalem, the produce can be redeemed by transferring its sanctity onto coins. The owner then brings the coins to Jerusalem and buys food with them. The sanctity of the coins is thus transferred to the purchased food, which is then subject to the laws of Maser Sheni. During the 3rd and 6th years of Shemitah cycle, Maser Ani, the tithe of the poor, must be separated. It is given to the poor. Maser Ani does not have sanctity. The poor person may give it to any person to eat, and it may be eaten even by someone who is tameh, ritually impure. The 7th year of the cycle is the year of Shemitah, when produce is ownerless. Produce of Shemitah is entirely exempt from all terumos and masros. All right, I'm going to stop here, and I will pick up at a different video.